Never believe a gaming journalist, and this seems to be a new rule that a lot of gamers are living and dying by. And I think it makes good sense because a lot of games journalists and their reviews mean nothing nowadays, especially to a lot of players that have been playing a lot of games recently and seen the discrepancies between what the gaming journalists think is good and between what the gamers actually think is good. And we see the same discrepancy in the news channels that we watch today, where we have these different worlds where different pockets of society see things completely differently. And I think that has translated to the video gaming world, where one set of journalists are looking at a game based on their political philosophies, while another set of journalists are just looking at a video game. And I think that's what we're seeing in society today, a schism between the gamers and the actual journalists that may not actually even play video games from what we're seeing. And this is playing out in the video gaming industry because we're seeing so much of gaming not be occupied by gamers anymore, and more so occupied by activists. And this is playing out online and on social media, where we get these activists talking about gaming without understanding gaming at all. And most recently, I saw this comic from a highly regarded artist talking about gamers hating female characters and protagonists. And you're looking at the characters that they're showing and they're saying, oh, gamers hate Tomb Raider, gamers hate Miss Pac-Man, gamers hate all these new female characters that were already highly regarded. But in their mind, this is a person that doesn't play video games making a comic about video gamers, who has no understanding that all these characters that he's showing are much maligned and hated by the activists on their side. I'm talking about Anita Skarsgård, who came out attacking Bayonetta.
It's basically a choose-your-own patriarchal adventure fantasy,
saying it's a terrible game that objectifies women in such an egregious way, in a disgusting way. And she said the same thing about Tomb Raider, the new Tomb Raider and old Tomb Raider that came out, that objectifies women in such a gross and negligent way. And she said the same thing about Miss Pac-Man. And of course, all these characters that are suggested here that are supposedly hated by gamers are actually beloved by gamers. The only people that hate them are the people that don't play games, and the people that are making comics about gamers themselves have no understanding of the gamers that actually love the characters that they say gamers hate. And this is a thing that we see in the overall gaming industry right now, and it extrapolates outward into society as well, where we have people talking about subjects where they have no understanding. They just align with whatever political activist side is telling them about a different side, and they're attacking negligently without understanding the concepts that are happening within the industry itself. And I think this is where we have the gaming industry wrapped up in politics right now, which is not anything a gamer wants out of the industry. We just want good games. But we have actors that actually don't care about games coming in and trying to set the table of what gamers are supposed to focus on. And I think we see this all throughout with Gamergate and all the things that happen and correlated with that, where games are now a political activist messaging tool, and it's being played out between game journalists and actual gamers, and the developers are being wrapped up in it and being lost by these philosophies themselves and creating terrible products that nobody actually wants to play. And I think this is a situation where gamers are just not believing any journalists right now, much in a similar way where people are not believing regular journalists, political journalists anymore, because everything has been made into a subjective standpoint and doesn't really regard facts anymore. Everything that we see coming out of the gaming industry right now is based on their activist messaging and has no regard to the gameplay. We're so used to this middling messaging that we already know what IGN is going to do if they don't know where to go with the message. They're just going to go with a 7 for any game that they don't know what the gamers are feeling about. If they agree with the messaging and they know the game is terrible, they're going to give it a 7. And that's what we see consistently in the gaming industry today, is a bunch of 7s being given out by these gaming journalists that really don't know the industry that they're working in. And what we see now is a deterioration in the gaming industry itself, where the developers, the writers are all doing the same thing, creating content in the same way, because they're following this very similar messaging, where the game reviewers are doing the same thing the developers are doing. Everyone has coalesced into this single messaging entity where the gamers are just put off by that, and you see this discrepancy in reviews and overall reactions to terrible games. with games like Dustborn that are getting favorable reviews from Kotaku, while the gamers are simply just not playing these games, where it's barely getting 2 to 3 players a day playing their game. Same thing with Concord, where Concord was a massive failure, barely peaking at 600 players. We had multiple articles coming out saying, give it a chance, it's a good game, I promise you gamers, go play it. We gave it a 7, even though we know it's terrible, we gave it a 7, so you think it's absolutely okay to play it. And that's just not the case for a lot of gamers nowadays. And you can see that with the exact opposite messaging with games like Black Myth Wukong, where they're selling 30 million copies, making $1 billion, and they're barely getting similar ratings to Concord. The same thing with Stellar Blade, a game that was highly touted, respected, a game that came out to much acclaim and overall positive response from the fan base, but it got criticized and destroyed by the mainstream media for looking more appealing and attractive. And you can see the hypocrisy here, where they're saying they love attractiveness of LGBTQ characters in Hades 2, but they hate the attractiveness of a more single and straight oriented character in Stellar Blade like Eve. And this is the dichotomy that we're seeing here, where when things don't fit their political philosophies, they attack it. When it fits their political philosophies, they praise it. And the gamers are noticing this consistently within the journalist industry of gaming, and they're pushing back, they're stepping away. And you can see this by the lack of responses that we're seeing from a lot of articles from Kotaku, The Gamer, and a multitude of other gaming social media websites that are losing favor and firing and laying off multiple employees. And this is playing out in real time in the industry, and you can see the overall fall off of gaming journalists who have ensnared themselves in this ideology that is tearing the gaming industry apart. And that's why I say, if you're a gamer, don't listen to the critics out there. They don't have your best experience in favor. We can go back to games like Days Gone, which is a game that sold almost 10 million copies, made hundreds of millions of dollars for Sony in profit, and Sony refused to make a sequel because the game reviewers hated the game because it focused on a white male leading character. And this is a game that was the first experience for me to realize, oh, these people that are reviewing games based on not playing the game and based on their political activism rather than the gameplay and content. And I think that's why people always mention Days Gone, because it was a great game that was destroyed by the journalistic media. And until a few years later, when I played it, I was realized, oh, this is a great game. Why did people hate this game? You realize, oh, it's because it strayed away from the politics of the gaming journalists and of the developers, and it strayed away of the consultancy firms like Sweet Baby Inc. that have influence over these journalists. If you don't know that, journalists and developers have been switching off in positions between consultancy firms and game developers and game journalist positions for the past decade or so with consultancy firms. And you can see this with Sweet Baby Inc. in their influence with multitude of games, where these people that were once journalists are now consultants, and people that were once consultants are now developers. We see this kind of breeding between these three factions that are ultimately producing a disastrous consequence for the gaming industry, stacking up multiple failures for developers and ultimately shutting down multiple studios. That's why you can't listen to them. You can't listen to the developers, you can't listen to the journalists, and most of all, you can't listen to the consultants and these reports criticizing and lambasting the gamers for not protecting and following these diverse trends within the industry. And that's why you never listen to the gaming journalists. Maybe you don't believe what I'm saying. You tell me what you think. I think it's a golden rule. If you're a new gamer, if you're a gamer in general, you just can't listen to anyone anymore besides the people that you trust. And I think that's ultimately what we all should do for any kind of journalism nowadays, because journalism nowadays is fraught with lies, deceit, and overall compromises that we just don't respect in our everyday lives. But you tell me what you think about the situation. Like, comment, share, subscribe. This is Wagner Knows Why. Catch you next time.